Welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 13. Today we're going to discuss some ways to beat what we're calling the lock-in blues.
Lock-in blues? That sounds like some kind of Johnny Cash prison music.
Well, maybe. In this instance, we're actually referring to running out of things to do while we're all practicing this social distancing that's either recommended or mandated in some areas. I think this is an opportunity to take something that obviously can be very negative and find the silver lining and turn it into something a little more positive.
You know, I think that is very smart. After all, there's not a lot that we can do to change the current situation, but we can change how we look at it and how we react to it. It is oftentimes easy to find a way to be negative about things, but we should never underestimate our ability to find a silver lining. I agree.
You know, the upside to this situation is the increased amount of time that we're spending with our families. The downside is the increased time that we're spending with our families.
Oh, I hear you. So, we have several things that you may be able to do to keep yourselves busy, keep yourselves entertained, learn some things, and generally keep from driving each other crazy.
That is the plan. Now, one of these items, the PC build, admittedly is not something that's going to be of interest or even feasible for everyone. We just so happen to have already had this project in our pipeline to build a PC for Lily and Addie's grandparents' business. Since we already had the wheels in motion to do this, we just decided to move this episode up a little bit and use it as an activity you could do with the kids. Now, we don't want to be insensitive to those people that have lost jobs or income, and so along with this project, we also have some less expensive suggestions for you as well.
Hey, Bruce. Yeah, I think that's a good plan. You know, this event has really affected everybody in one way or another, right? Many people have lost their jobs or are on furlough. Still others, are accustomed to working in a office environment and now are working from home. And, even those who maybe have always worked from home are already facing a lot of changes because of their customers, but also because of, working in an environment with a lot more family around perhaps than they're used to.
So let's go over some ideas that range from small home improvement projects, many of which may actually save you money in the long run, to entertainment options, to some educational opportunities. And certainly if you've got Netflix or another streaming service, you could binge watch their original content, and that's fine, that's an option for you. But we're going to take a look at maybe some more engaging opportunities and ones that allow you to get more of the family participating.
So that sounds good. So what kinds of home improvement can we do to save some money, especially that won't, break the bank?
Fantastic question, Keith. We actually have an episode in our queue about installing a setback thermostat. Now, if everyone's home, having a setback thermostat or one that changes the temperature while you're gone isn't necessarily going to save you a lot of money since everyone is home. But that is something that down the road in the future, when people start leaving the house more again, that's potentially going to save you some significant money. However, we do have an idea that would save you energy while everyone's home, and that's if you still have incandescent bulbs installed in your home, replacing those with either LED or fluorescent lights. Now, my preference is LED over fluorescent for many reasons. Typically, they last longer and they offer more pleasing light. They also typically come on faster and reach full brightness right away. As well, more models of LED bulbs are going to be dimmable versus fluorescents as well. Now, with everyone staying home, the nice thing is, even if you don't have the money to replace all of your incandescent bulbs with LED, you can pick the areas you're using most and replace those bulbs for only a small investment. Then you're going to reap the rewards of those energy savings for the life of that LED bulb. So how much energy savings are we talking? Well, for example, if you have a 100-watt incandescent bulb and you replace it with the 100-watt output equivalent of LED, that's going to typically use about 17 watts or maybe even slightly less. So that means you're using less than 20% of the energy of the original 100-watt bulb for the life of that bulb. Think of it this way, you can have over 5 lights on for the same energy consumption as that single 100-watt bulb. Now, your actual mileage is obviously going to vary, but that's fairly typical that you'd have a 100-watt bulb replaced with the LED equivalent and consuming 17 watts or so. Now, along with the energy savings, LED bulbs typically last anywhere from 3 to 10 times longer than their incandescent equivalent. So not only are you going to save money on the energy, but you're also going to save money on replacing those bulbs over time.
Okay, yeah. So if somebody has avoided or has resisted changing away from incandescents, maybe this is the moment or the time to do it, right? Because there is time and there is money savings to be had. And, frankly, this is the kind of project that the kids can and probably should help out with as well, right? As long as the fixture isn't in a really high or awkward location and it's a dangerous thing. But in general, I think the kids could help. And frankly, it would be good to either download an app from your energy company, assuming they have one, or just to take a simple snapshot of your energy bills to do a before and an after situation, and turn that into a lesson as well.
Exactly. And don't forget your outdoor bulbs, right? Many people have bulbs in the eaves of their house. Now, those can be a little bit trickier to install. You typically need a long pole and the suction cup, but that also is a project you can get done, especially if you're starting to convert from winter to spring like we're starting to do here in Nebraska. So while we're talking about light bulbs, let's also discuss dimmers. Dimmers can accomplish a couple of things for you. First, if you don't need your light at retina burning levels, then you can use a dimmer to lower that light to a more comfortable level. In the process, you're also going to save some energy. Second, dimmers can help you set maybe a little bit more desirable mood in the room. Now, dimmers are a fairly easy do-it-yourself project, and there's tons and tons of videos on YouTube that you can find to do that. Just make sure you follow the proper precautions since you are dealing with electricity. Okay, so you might be saying to yourself, hey, didn't you say you were going to have some ideas for projects that don't require a lot of money? What are those? Well, if you like cars like we do, and you own one, then you can take the kids outside and teach them how to properly wash a car. There are literally thousands of YouTube videos on how to do so. And you don't necessarily have to buy a bunch of expensive chemicals to do it. So, this is educational, and if you live in a cold weather climate like we do, it gets that road grime and salt off the car like it needs to be done.
Oh, I like that idea. The weather's just getting right for that here in Michigan. We could pull the shop vac out, and I bet we get 2 pounds of gravel out of the Jeep at this point.
You and me both, Keith. Also, this is a great time to disinfect the car. Speaking of disinfecting, this is probably a great time for the entire family to chip in and do some spring cleaning, as well as deep clean the house. Why wait till the weather is nicer when you can get this indoor stuff done and out of the way?
Yeah, and speaking of cars, it might be a good time to clean out the garage if you have one, right? Or just go around the yard and pick up some of the dead items from the trees and shrubs and things like that.
Absolutely. And again, this is if your weather is cooperating with you. As well, it doesn't have to be all about working around the house. Perhaps it's time to dig out those old board games like Monopoly and Life and Scrabble and probably dozens of other examples I didn't mention.
Yes, board games, so you don't get bored. It is a little known fact that I am a Chutes and Ladders master.
I actually had no idea. Absolutely none.
Hey, what can I say? I'm full of surprises.
Yes, you are. So continuing with our items to keep you busy, perhaps you have a toilet flapper that leaks slightly, or a faucet that's dripping. These are usually good, low-cost home improvement projects you can do yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably go on and on and on, right? But, I think the overall idea is, look around at your situation with the fresh set of eyes, with the clean slate, so to speak. Maybe there's things around the house that you've been putting off that you could get done. Maybe there's some old, family favorite activities that you haven't done in a long time. Or just some hobbies that you've been neglecting, or just some kind of bucket list things that you've always wanted to explore.
Great point. And if you don't live alone, are these activities that you can share with someone? Or perhaps you've been sharing a little too much, and everyone needs some space within the space in order to have some time to do the things that they want to do. This is a deal that could last a while, and if that's the case, then everyone's going to need some time that they are together and some time that they're apart.
So I think this is probably a good place to transition over to an activity that you recently did with Lily and Addie. I think that you guys just did a computer build together, isn't that correct?
It is. My parents own a business, and they thought it was time to get a new PC. And so the great thing about building a PC is you can decide which parts of the PC you want to emphasize and buy those components based on your need. With the recent events lately, I thought this was a great opportunity to do something with two of my daughters that would be fun and educational for them.
That is awesome. Let's jump right in.
All right, so it may not look like it, but what I have here are all the makings of a computer. Everything is all boxed up. So really the only thing that I'm probably missing in this entire process is some help. So why don't I call Lily and Addie in to give us a hand with this. Hey Lily, Addie.
You called?
Oh, there you guys are. Hey, we are going to build a computer today. So, remember how I told you how Papa and Grandma, they wanted a new computer for their work? Well, they're going to have us build one, and we thought, you know what? With everyone facing this social distancing that's going on, what a great project, we thought, to work on with a couple of my daughters. So, really, this is, one of many ideas that are out there. Obviously, not everyone's going to have the resources to buy the components to build a computer, and that's fine, right? This is one idea of many. And the idea is really, where we've got this time together, let's go ahead and leverage that and do something fun. Obviously, you can barely see Lily and Addie over the top of the computer components. We'll just walk through really quickly what we have. So, as we go through, we're going to talk about each component. This item right here, this is the computer processor. So, does either of you know what a computer processor is?
Does it process information it receives?
It does. So you can think of this as the brain of the computer, okay? So this is going to be the brain, or the CPU, or central processing unit of our computer. So Addie, why don't you go ahead and put that aside for us? And along with the brain, we are going to need some memory to work with, right? So this is our memory that we're going to put in here, and we're putting in 16 gigabytes of memory. So you know how we can think of memory? So when you do something, right, and you have short-term memory, that's what this is, right? RAM, or random access memory. When our brain is working with new things that it sees and observes, or it's trying to compute things, it needs that short-term memory to work with. And that's what our RAM is for our computer. So if we were to shut our computer off, this short-term memory gets erased. Okay, so that's like our short-term memory in our brains. So let's go ahead and put that aside. Now, this is a solid-state drive, and it's actually an NVMe solid-state drive, which is just a type of technology. So if our RAM is our short-term memory, the storage here, this solid-state drive, is our long-term memory. So this is going to give our computer the ability that if we shut it off and then we turn it back on, that information that's stored here is saved. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that aside. Next, let's talk about our motherboard. So our motherboard is where all of our components within the system are going to connect. And so what we use this for is all of our expansion, our CPU plugs in here. There are lines or traces to the short-term memory, the long-term memory, or the storage. This is basically what makes the computer able to talk to different components within it. So this is our motherboard, and this will get installed in our case. And then all of our components will get installed inside of it. Let's go ahead and put that one aside. Addie, thank you. Next, this very plain looking box is an optical drive. And so an optical drive, this is like our Blu-ray player, our DVD player upstairs, right? We can put discs in there, and we can either write information to it, or we can play information that's been pre-recorded, like movies. So Grandma and Grandpa want to have actually an optical drive, although it's becoming less and less common these days. They want to have one in the system, so we've got one that we're going to install. And again, it's very generic looking right now, but when we crack that open, you'll be able to see that it's a Blu-ray drive. Next, we have our power supply. So our power supply provides the power we need from the wall, converting that into something that our motherboard and all of our components attached can utilize. And we've got a 650 watt unit that we've purchased from Corsair, and it's what's called modular, or basically all the cables we can plug in that we need, and we don't have to have extra cables installed that we don't need. So let's go ahead and put our Corsair power supply aside.
Cables like headphones and stuff?
No, not that type of cable. So our CD-ROM drive, and that's a great question, Addie. Our CD-ROM drive, our motherboard, our if we had storage that required power that didn't come from the motherboard, that would be plugged into it. Our cooling fan will get power off of that. So they're cables that connect our various components within the computer and provide power to them. So you have to have something that takes that wall outlet power and converts it into from AC to DC, or direct current versus alternating current. Now, I already kind of mentioned this cooler. What this does is it keeps our brain cool, right? So like if we're hot, we sweat, and that helps keep our brain cooled. Well, if we didn't have a cooler on our processor, it would get too hot, and then it wouldn't think well, and then eventually it'll just make the whole computer shut down because the brain doesn't want to kill itself, or basically make itself get destroyed. So it'll protect itself from overheating. This cooler allows us to run it all the time and not have it overheat. Now we are going with an air cooler. So it's got a fan and it's got fins attached to it, and these fins provide that cooling function. We could water cool, but we're not going to get that complex for this particular build. So let's put that aside. And then finally, this huge box that's left is the case. And so the case is where we put all of our components. There's also some cooling that gets installed in there. And so we're going to install our power supply. We're going to install our motherboard on it. We're going to put our DVD drive, or actually Blu-ray drive, in here and connect everything together, and then seal it all up with the sides, right, and the front according to the components that we've purchased. So, any questions before we get started?
Does Mom's computer have a fan like Grandma and Grandpa's is gonna have?
No, she's got a laptop. So they have a different fan. That would obviously, that's almost the size of Mom's laptop, right? So it's not going to fit in a laptop chassis. This is a mid-tower case. It's technically a gaming case, although Grandma and Grandpa aren't going to be doing any gaming on it. So with that, we're going to go ahead and maybe pause, start to open up some of these items, and then start integrating them in to build our computer. Okay, so we have taken the case out of the box. We didn't film that just because it's fairly trivial, right? We're taking a big case out of the box. And this is really all that came with the case, at least from this part, right? When we open this up, I think some of our accessories are going to be inside. But we have our instructions here. We're going to put that aside. And then to get this open, this particular case has got what I call thumb screws. And so we can simply pull the side of it off. We lift this up. And now you can see some of the things we have in there. I'm just going to roll back just a little bit here. Oops, sorry, Lil. I think that kind of knocked you out of place a little. All right.
Thing over here.
Yep. So let's talk about some of the items that are in here. I'm not sure how well you're going to see those. Let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit on some of this detail. Okay, so we have some cables and that are inside of the case, and they've been cable tied down to the chassis. So we've got several items here. One, we're going to have things like the speaker connector for the front of the chassis, the power switch so that when you press the power button it turns the computer on, and this is the external USB. So we've got external USB ports that are attached to the computer themselves versus the motherboard, right? So this is going to attach to the motherboard and provide those USB connections. I believe this is going to be our audio. So we've got our audio that's attached and connects to our speaker. And then back here, you might be able to see this cable is one of our fan cables. And so this is going to allow us to connect this back chassis fan to the motherboard and give it power so that we can cool our chassis. Now this particular chassis just has a single fan installed, so that'll be fine. It's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. This is an i5. It's got its own cooler, so you know there's not going to be a ton of components installed in here. There's not a high-end graphic card or anything, so we're not going to have to worry about heat generation quite as much as maybe a gaming rig would produce. All right, so we're back with the motherboard, ready to start putting components on it. As well, right next to the motherboard, we have something that's critical to this process. Lily, what do we have in front of me?
A toolbox.
Ah, this is our tool case, right? And so you're going to want to have, you don't necessarily have to have this kit or one that's quite this elaborate, but you are going to want probably a small Phillips head, something that's fairly precision, and maybe a small flathead, right? Those are some tools that are going to come in handy. This is actually a computer building kit. It's not terribly expensive. I think you can pick this up online for about 20 bucks. And there's tons and tons of this probably almost exact same looking kit with a number of different manufacturers for it. So if you want something like this, not just for a computer build, but just to have some nice precision screwdrivers and that type of thing around, this is not a bad option for you. So inside you can see we've got just every bit that you could possibly want handy, as well as the screwdriver, and it is a ratcheted one as well. You can hook up an extension to it, so if you've got something where you've got to go around a corner, so to speak, or to an area that's hard to reach, and you can't get your fat fingers back there, like my fingers have trouble getting into some parts of the computers, those are available to you. So we're going to need this at some point as well. If you work on laptops or some other kinds of computers, it's got some of the plastic prying elements that you can use, so it comes in pretty handy, and again, it's not terribly expensive. We're going to put this aside right in front of Lily, and then let's talk about our motherboard. So this is an Intel motherboard. It's a Z series, right? So you know that makes it the 390. This is an Intel chipset. It is good for, I believe, the 8th and 9th generation CPUs. And so we're going to go ahead and open this up.
Wow, so shiny.
So anyone know what this plastic bag on top of here is called? Anyone at all?
The plastic bag?
Well, it is a plastic bag. It's a special plastic bag. This is a static dissipating bag. And so one thing that we want to talk about during this build is static electricity. You know what static electricity is, right?
Yeah, it's when your hair goes all over the place.
Yeah, or you rub your feet against the carpet and then you walk over to your sister and give her a shock, right?
Yeah.
Not that you would ever do that, right?
No.
You'd never do that to Lily, would you, Addie? So, we want to make sure that as we're building this system, that we are guarding against static electricity. So let's get the motherboard pulled out of the box real quick here. And let's take a look here. It has some of its own accessories, okay? So this is what's called a SATA cable, right? So we have one of those handy. And there should be some other items around inside of here to deal with. So let's take a look. Oh, we've got some things that are underneath here. So we've got a user... What's this? What's this say it is?
User guide.
So their user guide, right? And we've got some what's called set-off nuts and the screws that go with it, and then some additional small screws. I believe those are going to probably be for use with our NVMe drive to attach them to the motherboard, because NVMe drives get attached to your motherboard versus going into, say, a drive chassis. And then what's this look like?
Oh, it looks like the thing on the side of computers where you plug in all the stuff.
Yeah. So this is going to cover all of these ports so that they don't have all those ugly empty gaps, right? But they're shipped separately. So we'll install this in the case, and it covers the empty space on our motherboard. And every motherboard has a little bit different design, which is why the motherboard comes with this, and it's not just something that's integrated into the case. So one of the things that we're going to talk about static electricity, and some of the things that we can do, right, is guard against it. So look at this. What do you think this is?
It looks
What?
like a pumper.
Kind of looks like what?
A pumper, you know, like sometimes people put it around.
Oh, like a bellow?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a bellow. So this is called an alligator clamp, okay? Because it's got teeth and its mouth is shaped like an alligator, right? So if you take a look here, if it focuses on it, you can kind of see. It's not focusing really well on it, but get the idea. And then this, what does this look like?
It looks like something.
Kind of a bracelet,
Yeah.
right? So we can actually, part of this kit that makes it nice is it comes with a wrist bracelet and this alligator clip, so we can connect this to something that's grounded, and now, although we're not touching a lot of things that are probably going to generate a lot of static electricity, we can protect our computer components. So when we go to touch things that are static sensitive, we'll probably make sure that whoever's installing those has the wrist strap on, okay? Alright, so one of the things, in order to pull this out of the bag, there's areas of the motherboard that contain traces, and then there's areas that don't. And when I say traces, that means some of the motherboard isn't going to conduct any electricity, and then other parts of it have the gold traces, and they connect the various components of the motherboard to each other, right? So the CPU to the memory to our NVMe drive, and that's how they talk to each other, is through that circuit. So with that, why don't we go ahead and grab our case. We're going to cheat a little bit. And Addie, I'm going to have you go first. Let's have you put the wrist strap on. Okay. And we're just going to pick, it's usually best to find bare metal, but I'm not seeing a ton of bare metal, so we'll just pick something on the chassis here. Alright, we'll call that good enough. I don't think we're going to generate a lot of static electricity, but when we take this out, what we're going to do, and I like, technically speaking, we should probably have a computer build mat that helps dissipate the static electricity, but we do not have one. So, let's go ahead. Now, let's find a spot that doesn't have traces on it. Okay, so if you look at the bottom of the computers, right? So when I talk about the traces, here's a great example. One thing I've cheated and done is I'll just touch the edges of this, right? So maybe Addie, you can help me. Can you hold on to that so it doesn't fall over? How about up here towards the top? Now, the way that computer static bags work is the outsides are technically not static dissipating, right? So it's the inside that's protected, the outside is not. So we're going to want to be really careful in how we touch this motherboard and where we touch it and who's connected. Okay, so let's, Lil, do you want to move some of those cables that are inside out of the way a little bit? And we're just gonna put this on the set-offs a little bit here. So we turn this around. Addie, do you want to move that fan connection? And actually, we're probably going to need that. Why don't you... I probably picked a really bad spot for that to be on. So let's go ahead and pick this here, up there. And that's going to be an area that's not necessarily, we're worried about scratching, for example. So let's grab that. We're going to end up positioning it. Now we have to check and see if they've got set-off screws on all the locations that we need. So set-off screws basically hold the motherboard. See how the motherboard has got the circles of,
Yeah.
right?
So I'm right here too.
Yep. So there's areas where we screw the motherboard to the case, and it's set up off the case so that it doesn't damage it. Now, let's see if, okay, we can't set a different set off there. So this case is basically going to have a screw here, 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 and there. So those are the places that we're going to screw it in, and then there'll be one towards the middle of it. So static electricity, remember, is the enemy here. Okay, great job holding this up, Lily. Okay, so we need these nicely threaded screws, but they're not the smallest size. And we're going to need like 5 or 6 of these babies. All right, Lil, you are my nice threaded screw holder here. And let's get the right head. So let me take one of these, and we're going to find the bit. That's what these are called. These are called bits. We're going to find the bit that matches. It's a little loose. We want to make sure that the head of the screw and the head of the bit line up and don't move. See how that's pretty tight? It doesn't...
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and put that in. We're going to put one screw in here towards the back. Now, one thing we want to make sure we do is we're not going to put the screws in super tight yet. Okay, we only want to just kind of temporarily get those in.
Leave them a little loose.
Leave them loose, because what that's going to allow us to do is adjust the fine placement of the motherboard in the case and make sure that when we go to do this that it's all aligned. Okay, so let's get some of these screws in. Alright, so we are ready for our processor now. We've already lifted the lever and the door that covers the processor up. We are ready for the processor itself. And again, just to kind of cover what we're putting in here again, this is the i5-9600KF. This is one that is unlocked, meaning that we can overclock this if we choose to. This is also one that requires a discrete graphics adapter. This is probably an important note here. My intention was to actually run graphics through the motherboard, what was integrated here, but in the parts list that I sent over to my dad, I think the processor, he had to find another seller, and in that process accidentally stumbled across the one that requires the discrete graphics adapter versus having the graphics integrated in. So we'll just work through that. I've got an extra old graphics adapter laying around, and we can throw that in there, and if he wants to put something that's got more capabilities in it down the road, he can certainly do so. So we can at least keep rolling on the process of getting this processor put in the system and keep going on our system build. So with that, let's go ahead and get this 9th generation Intel i5 opened up. We need the knife Addie, which is right over there. She's going to grab that for me. Here we go. And we are going to slit this open and get this box opened up. Now, when you order these processors are going to come in, basically minimal amount of packaging, and as well, they do not come with coolers, so you have to go out and find the cooler that you want to use. We already kind of covered a little bit about the cooler, and so there's got just a little cardboard tab here. We lift this up, and now our processor is inside of this electrostatic little plastic container. So we are going to very carefully open this up. One of the things that we are going to do, and I'll have you note here, is there'll be a dot on the circuit board. There's also an arrow. This is going to allow us, there's basically one way that this will install. There's notches that'll help you align this. It'll only go into the socket one way. So make sure that you get everything lined up before you just go dropping the processor in, because if you put this in wrong and try and force it down and use the lever and the door, you can damage the processor, you can damage the socket, you can damage both at the same time, and if you do that, one or the other or both will become unusable. On the processor, you may be able to see this, there's two little notches out of the circuit board. Those notches are going to align with notches on the socket itself. And then there's an arrow pointing to the dot on the socket itself. And so there's only one way that we can lay this in. The two little notches are going to align on either side, and the arrow is pointing to the dot. And then when we are ready to, we can actually just lower this, and in the process of putting the lever down, we'll actually lift the socket cover off. You don't need to remove this socket cover. It actually happens as part of the process of pushing that lever down. So we have installed our processor in the system, and now we are ready to proceed with some more items. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get our power supply in, because that's going to be a critical point to get that taken care of. And we've got a certain amount of room down here for that. So Addie, the power supply is right behind you here. Let's get that. And in this process, Addie, I'm going to go ahead and unclamp you. Let's go ahead and flip this over real quick. And let's get the other side of our case taken off to get, hopefully, this cardboard removed here. So here's our cardboard box that had all our accessories. That's why we couldn't pull it out. It has the pins for holding the media in there that was sunk into the cardboard. So that's why we could pull and pull and pull, and it didn't want to pull out of there. So if you had SATA solid state drives instead of the NVMe, these are actually two places that you can install those on the back side, and then you would access it from this side of the case versus the other. So again, we don't need to really do anything on here. All right, so Addie, you have taken the cellophane off here. Let's go ahead and throw that away. We'll just keep our work area clean. Okay, so here is our power supply. This is probably bigger than we really need. We originally weren't planning on discrete graphics, but now we are going to have a discrete graphics at some point. So we've got some extra power supply capability, which is fine. We don't. It's not going to hurt us having the larger power supply. But the converse would not be true. If our power supply was undersized, we would actually be in trouble. So we'll take this bubble wrap off. We don't have to worry about static electricity with this because the power supply is fully enclosed. So let's take a look at this here. And you can see this is actually a pretty small unit in the grand scheme of things, right? So we were talking about the modularity of it. So the primary cabling is attached to the system. This is going to attach to the motherboard and the CPU and power those. And then our additional peripherals that get installed, things like graphics adapters and SATA connections and other items that require their own separate power, they will plug into here, and we only need to plug in what it is we need to power the components that we have installed in the system. So if we have very little installed, we're going to have a pretty clean solution in terms of number of cables that are modularly attached to our power supply and therefore have to be routed in the chassis. And I always like to make these look as clean as possible, although I don't probably do the cable management that your serious system builders do, and when you're throwing in the RGB or the pretty colored lights, right? This has no RGB. There's no pretty colored lights that are going to be installed in this. This is strictly a business system, and therefore it doesn't need that type of lighting installed. So we're going to go ahead and undo this. Yep, let's grab that silicone packet. That is not something to eat, so let's go ahead and throw that away, Lily.
Does it go right here?
Yes, it does. That opening is for that power supply. And I'm just undoing the cable tie, which was twisted about 9,000 times. And even though my wife has told me a million times not to exaggerate, I think that might actually be an accurate number. And we'll spin this around. You will know how to orient the power supply based on the opening in the back. So the screw hole should align, so you can see, Addie, you can see where those screws line up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are several holes to align. We also need to get this put here. All right, so we just need to align our power supply, and this is a case where having a couple people to work on this process is probably going to help significantly. And it is quite possible that not all of your holes are going to necessarily align a particular way. Like this, if I can flip this over. So the way this is going to work for us is we're going to be able to use several of these screw holes. This screw hole, that screw hole, that screw hole. And then one of our screws is going to have to basically just go in this cutout instead of this opening that was designed for the screws. All right, so our power supply came with screws. And I realize you can't see my head very well here. So, Lil, I will start these for you, and then you can finish them up. Why don't you hold on to those three, okay?
Okay.
And then...
Do you want me to hold it up?
Can you do that through the other side? Oh, yeah. There we go. Look at this, teamwork. What's gonna work?
Teamwork.
Slide that over. A little bit more. There we go. You make sure that you're starting it straight so you don't accidentally strip the screws or start to thread it. Okay, there's one. Addie, keep holding that. Where are the rest? There we go. Yeah, you need to make sure those holes line up. It should be sitting almost against the back of it. Push it so that it's... There you go. Gets heavy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is where the extra set of hands really does help. So we'll keep this on screen. All right, Lil.
We can throw the package away.
Yeah.
I need to throw a lot of stuff away.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of cleanup to do. All right, well, it's going to take a little bit of pressure because this is brand new. Okay? Okay, go ahead and screw that in.
Oh, wow, it is.
Mm-hmm. You want help? There, now you can finish that. You get it? All right, so now our power supply is securely screwed into the case, and we need to find a nice way to route our cables. So we are actually going to run this through the back side of the case. We'll just put all of our slack right there, and then let's flip this over and put it where people can see. We're going to be running across here, and then we're going to want to, I think, come out in this second opening. Basically is where that's going to be, and we might actually be in this upper one. So when we get done, what we may end up doing is just, you know, using some of these areas here. These are for cable ties to go through, and then for us to do our cable management. So we'll try and keep it. So this is the motherboard power. So let's make sure that everyone can see this here. Let's zoom in. So you notice here's our motherboard power, and if your motherboard doesn't need all these pins, you can actually separate two of these pairs off. So 4 of these connectors would actually not be used. And then you want to align this so that this will only plug in one way, and there's a clip on our connector. We want to probably give this just a little support because it's on the very end of our motherboard, and if we press down, we don't want to have that put extra pressure on it. We'll have that power connector that's up here, and again, this is keyed, so if you notice there's a notch going to be on that connector, and we've got the clip, so it'll only connect one way, so that clip needs to actually be pointing out. So these are always a tight fit, and we don't need to put any pressure underneath because this is right on where one of those supports is at. We will, however, while we're here now, go ahead and uncable tie the fan connector, and we're going to find our nearest fan connector that is for the chassis. And so we have a CHA fan 1 and CHA fan 2. That CHA stands for chassis. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. It has a connector that's keyed. So see this will slide up against, see how the plastic is there? So that those two sets of plastic get lined up together. And it will not cover all the pins. And so there's only 3 of the 4 pins that are going to be used for this fan connector. So we just got to line those up, and there we go. Then we'll make that nice and tidy a little bit later. So we've got that all squared away. Okay, so we are ready to put in our storage. So we've got an NVMe 512 gig drive that we're going to install. Addie, you want to go ahead and hand that to me? So here you can see that particular drive, and it's going to install in one of the 2 different locations that are located on the motherboard. And so we're going to open this package up. Addie, if you'll find the knife. I'm not sure where that got off to here. While we're at it, we're going to go ahead and also get our memory ready, or our RAM. And so I might be able to peel this off here while Addie is opening up the NVMe drive. And what does the RAM equate to? You remember?
Short-term memory.
Our short-term memory, right? So we've installed our brain, okay? And our particular memory is 3200 megahertz. So that the speed of memory is measured in the megahertz, and this isn't the fastest memory in the world, but it's still very, very fast. Probably well matched to an i5 6-core processor, so we should be in good shape. Again, these are static sensitive, so this is a static package that it's in, a static protected package, I should say. So I gotta go ahead and open this up while Addie's working on that. So our memory is what's called dual channel, and so on this particular motherboard, we will actually install it in A2 and B2. So our motherboard has the memory slots that are denoted B1, B2, A1, and A2. So we're going to go, it's in every other slot, so we'll open up the connectors on this side. There is a notch on the memory, so you can see that notch. You can only install it one way, so if it's not going in when you first try and align it, it probably needs to be flipped around and installed the other direction. And when you install it, you'll hear it click like that. And let's go ahead and grab our other memory module here. And again, the short side is this direction. And so this will now get installed in the A2 slot. That one was the B2 slot. If we had 4 memory modules, we would install it in all 4 of our slots. And with just a single memory module, it would go in the A2 slot. So our memory is installed, and Addie has freed our SSD drive. You'll notice this is extremely small, right? So this NVMe SSD drive, this is 512 gigabytes. So from a size perspective, this is amazingly small for how much storage is on this. And obviously compared to a hard drive, it's not even close, right? The hard drives are huge, you know, compared to this. Now, mind you, they're also going to store a lot more. So we need to get our SSD out of here, and it just is going to...
Very tiny screw too.
Yes, it does have a very, very small screw that is going to hold it down. So basically the way these get installed is there is a edge connector that they install in. There's the directions, and it's actually got a little buffer on there. So we're going to pull this out from the side, and again, that screw is going to get used. You might not be able to see that, but it's in the, so you can roll it around there. So that is going to be used to hold it down. So again, we have 2 different slots we can install this in. We can install it in here, or we can install it in here. There's another one that looks very similar, but this is for a Wi-Fi module. So we're going to go ahead and choose the slot down here. And again, this is keyed as well. So if you notice on this particular device, there's an edge connector, and then it is keyed. So you can see the memory is keyed there. And we could probably get a graphic to throw up there as well. So you just slide this in. It's not going to really make any noise, and then you see it's kind of almost spring-loaded. And so we'll grab our little screw here and make sure that this is the right size head. We'll put that one here, and we are going to very carefully then move this back down, and there's just a little receptacle for that, and we are going to screw that in, and that's all the tighter we need to make it. So you don't need to screw that down super tight. There's no reason for that. It can only cause problems, and so that is now installed. Okay, so we are ready to install our optical drive. That's also going to require that we route some power for that as well, since we are going to install now a graphics adapter. That is going to require some supplemental power to boot. So let's go ahead and get this front of the case off. And so we just basically friction push that direction. We'll kind of put that aside a little bit here, and now we have access to the front of the case, so we can install our DVD drive. And actually, I believe this is a Blu-ray. I keep calling it DVD, but that's because I'm old school. So let's go ahead and get this removed from the package. Yes, it has a power connector. So let's check out what kind of power connector we're going to need. This is a SATA Blu-ray player and writer, and so it's got SATA power and SATA connector. So we're going to go ahead and install this like so. And we'll figure out what looks flush. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and take the case. Has a panel covering that in case you didn't do an optical drive. You wouldn't have a blank opening there. So we're going to remove that blank from here. and we're going to position this here so that way we can tell how deep this drive needs to be in order to look flush. So we're obviously quite a bit off right now, so we're going to go ahead and slide this down. Get all of those connected, and let's see if we can sneak this on this way or not. Nope, not really. Okay, so let's just take this off again. Woo! Got it off. All right, so we're going to take this off. We're going to put this back on, and we can slide this in this way. Make sure it's right side up. So again, here's our Blu-ray. It's an LG drive. It is not sponsored. We just happened to buy that particular one, and we just line the screw up, and you might be able to see here that screw is showing through. That is what we need to connect. So there's the screw hole that we need to put that in. I'm going to go ahead and get our SATA connector out, our cable. Yeah, I think we'll end up having one on each side that we install. So there's our SATA cables. We'll throw that over there. We'll clean that up later. And we should be able to put that right into our drive. If I get this started, Lil, do you want to finish it for me? Here you go. This one is not going to be nearly as hard. So go ahead and get that screwed in. Here we go. I'll get back in the frame here. There you go. So you're going to hold that for me real quick, and we'll flip this over and we'll put one in on the other side as well. If we can see it. Yeah, we can just barely get to that. So, Addie, you got that screw for me? Okay. So we're going to have to just kind of, uh-oh. At least it fell all the way through.
Yeah. And not into.
Yeah, it's not into. Let's see if we can do this through this hole right here. Not the. Oh, I'm stuck. So I need to extend. I need to use that extension on our. Oh, that one. That's not the right extension. So we'll see if we can use this. Oh, that's going to be too big too. I think that doesn't really help us because I don't think that's going to go through. No, it will not. All right, so we're going to probably have to cheat, and hopefully we'll just put that there. Addie, in that drawer next to you is some screwdrivers that are just So we'll just try this using an old school screwdriver, and I don't think this one is oh, it is magnetic. We got lucky. And we might have to just put a little pressure on this to change where. Oh, maybe it is screwing in. Oh yeah, there we go. So we got it. All right, perfect. So just 2 screws to hold that in. Again, there's not like a lot of G-forces for that to be flying around inside of the case. We just really want to keep it situated there so that a little bit of pressure that would be pushing on the door to open and close the Blu-ray drive would not cause it to move around. So next we need to connect its power and its SATA. And so the motherboard had come with a couple of cables, including this one that has a nice right angle on it. So I don't know if you can see that right angle. If I turn it like this, I think you can. So we've got a right angle. That works great for keeping that out of the way in the back of it. So we're going to connect it up to the back of the Blu-ray drive, and then we're going to run that all the way down to our SATA connectors, and we're just going to connect it up to the SATA 1 just because it says 1. Exactly. So you're on the same page, Addie. And you got to make sure these are keyed, and so you got to make sure that they're lined up the right way. And that one was upside down. There we go. Now you can hear it. And we probably, I don't know if we have room to run this through the cable management or not, but let's see if we do. If we do, then we'll get that out of the way and keep this looking nice. But I'm not sure that our cable is quite long enough to do that. So let's see if we can. Let's see here. Where do we need to come out at? Oh, that'll work. Oh, we might get lucky. Oh, it's just long enough, I think. But we might have to twist it. Let's see. Yep. And that actually doesn't look too bad. Plus, we'll be hiding it behind that other. Okay. Make sure I'm not putting it down on Lily's fingers. Okay, perfect. So we have the Blu-ray data cable. We're going to need power for it. So that is where our modular cables come into play. We've got the SATA style connector versus what's called a Molex style. Molex would be older, but you might run across that from time to time. SATA is the newer standard, so you'll have that type of connector most of the time. And so what we'll have is the various SATA power connectors for devices, and then this end plugs into our power supply. So we want to find one of our available openings on the power supply that we can plug this into, and I'm seeing one that is 6 pins. So you'll line that up to make sure that it's on a 6-pin connection. And there's a little bit tight in there, but we'll make it work. And it is keyed, and we got that in and connected. So I don't know if you were able to see that, but we just plugged it into the power supply into a 6-pin connector. We definitely have the cable distance to be able to run this through the cable management. So we'll run this out the back side here. And there's a lot of cable to manage, so we'll just run that through, and we'll flip it over because it'll be much easier to see this way. So we're going to just run it just like we did some of these other connectors, and we'll run it through this opening. We're only going to need one of our connectors because we're only powering one device, and you can see that it popped up right here. We're able to plug that, and then we've got some extra cable length. We're just hiding up at the top of the case, so that'll be unseen up there. So now we have what should hopefully be a fully functioning Blu-ray device. We have memory installed. We have our storage installed on the motherboard. So really we're getting down to some of the last elements. We have to install a graphics adapter, so we'll go ahead and undo 2 of these slot covers because our graphics card is going to consume 2 slots worth of spaces. So we'll just put that out of the way. We'll put these screws here. Addie, if you'll hold that by the edges and hand me that graphics adapter. Yeah. So this is a graphics adapter or graphics card. So it's got a couple of different types of connections, actually 3 different types. It's got DisplayPort, it's got HDMI, and it's got DVI connections on it. So you can connect a variety of different things. Back in the day, this was a pretty decent graphics card. Today, this is definitely nothing special, but it is at least a good enough graphics card to run some modern business applications, and then as well. And I think I need to take 2 different slots off. Yep, I missed by 1 slot. So we got to take a couple different slots off. Actually, just 1 more. We'll just move that slot over because it's not the top 2 slots. It's the 2 after the first one. I'm not going to make them super tight yet, just in case we do end up having to pull this card out. Now, this card does, even though it's not super new, does require some extra power. So that's going to mean that we have to dip back into our additional power connections to connect up to our modular power supply. So we'll just grab this. So this style connector is what's required for the graphics adapter. This particular card, I believe, requires a 6-pin versus an 8 like some do. So we'll just verify that this is going to be the right connection. And that is all we're going to need. And so we can run it through our cable management if we'd like to, which I'm going to, just if nothing else, to kind of keep the interior of the case a little bit tidier. So again, run it through the cable management area. And Addie's got a hold of it over here. Yep, be careful not to pull any of those connectors off. You can keep running that. And then literally we're just going to go through this next opening again. So we didn't run it real far, but you'd be amazed at how much just that little bit of moving things in and out of those cable management areas will keep things a little bit more tidy. And then we are going to need one of the 8-pin connections to connect this to. Thanks, Lily. And oops, I gotta flip this around. Hold on. These are keyed, so watch your fingers. There we go, and bingo, I think we got it. There we go. Again, this is not, builder grade type of cable management. It's really just, hey, let's keep things as clean as possible. This doesn't even have a glass door on the case, so people won't even see what we've done. But it is kind of nice to keep your cabling as neat as possible. It does a little bit of keeping the airflow as good as possible. You don't have cables just sitting around and blocking the air from moving around the chassis to some degree. So we are now ready, I believe, to put in the cooler. All right, so we've got our cooler positioned, started to get the screws put in, but we need to put those the rest of the way in. Everything's in alignment, and that's exactly the way we want it to be. So we need to tighten down all 4 screws for the cooler. Now, one thing, we'll want to tighten these down, but they don't have to be super, super tight, right? So this isn't going to be experiencing a ton of G-forces or anything like that inside of the case, and overexerting the screw pressure is going to actually create extra pressure on the processor that we don't need, right? So we'll continue to put these screws in. So it feels like all of these are pretty well tightened down, at least as much pressure as we need. So we're going to go ahead and put our fan back on. We'll want to position the fan so that the cable is down and over towards the area where the CPU fan blocks are located. And so we'll just snap this into place on that side and snap it into place on that side. And that is good. And then we just need to locate one of our 2 CPU fan connectors, which there are 2 right here, right by where the fan is located. So we'll just kind of twist this out of the way just a little bit, since there is a little bit of ability to move that for us. And we'll line this up. Just cut this. Okay, so the CPU fan portion of the cooler is attached. We'll probably zip tie that cable around there so it doesn't accidentally get freed up and work its way into the CPU fan that's spinning. We have the video card here. Power's connected to it. Really, we're really to the point where we can probably just do a little bit of cable management on the back side of this. So we thought we originally were shorted this metal plate, didn't see it in our packaging, and then Addie actually located it. So we decided off camera that we would pull the bolts and nuts off and get this plate put back in place the way it's supposed to. So this is actually how that's supposed to look. So just in case you had ever done this before and you noticed that we were missing this piece, that is installed. So we've gotten that taken care of. We're just going to do a little bit of cable management here. It'll keep some of our cables from getting places they're not supposed to be. So I'm just going to put one through here. And it's pretty simple. You just slide it through. And then let's go ahead and actually catch this cable as well. And then we're going to pull this through. Addie, I've got some scissors in the drawer behind you if you want to grab those. Yes. So I'm going to get this pulled over here. What I'm going to do is actually kind of position it so that it's a little bit out of the way of this screw, and then it'll run straight up here. And then put the other side of our case back on. smash this down a little bit. Let's see if it's going to sit flat. Yeah, there we go. So just make sure that all of your sides, top and bottom, are flush. And up here as we are. And then you want to go ahead and turn that thumb screw there. So I'm turning this one. Lily's got the top one. There we go. Got it? Yeah. And we don't have to be super, super tight there. So let's go ahead and flip our case over. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to do in here? Let's take a look. Well, you know what? Let's zip tie the power connector and this fan cable up here. So let's make this so that people can see it.
This time.
Yep. So they're not going to be able to see this real well, but there's a fan cable that we're going to just zip tie to the CPU power cable.
Oh, I see it.
And that'll keep that from accidentally making its way towards the rear chassis fan. Thanks, Lobo. There we go.
Dad, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What are these green purple things for?
So you may be able to see this. There is a little mouse emblem up here and a keyboard emblem. The purple is the keyboard, the green is the mouse. And so there was a style of connector called PS2. And if we have a legacy style or that PS2 style keyboard and mouse, we can plug them in here. Otherwise, if we don't, then we don't have to worry about that, and we would use USB versions of them. Exactly. So I think we are actually even done inside of the chassis. I don't think there's anything else on this part that we need to do, so we can go ahead and button this up. There's just a little gap that it doesn't have to be super tight, Addie.
Okay.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
That should be good enough. Thumb tightened is all we needed. So
Now we can do
when
it.
we come back, we are gonna go ahead and load the operating system on it real quick. We're gonna switch our camera setup and that. And before we do that, we actually have some Bananas Fosters for dessert.
Yeah.
So we are gonna have that real quick, then come back, finish up this video, and show you the operating system being installed. But really, from the inside, this is done. We just need to get an operating system on it, and we can call this a done build.
Yeah.
Alright, so we are back from dessert, and we have the computer plugged in, ready to power it on for the first time, and this is always that tense moment of truth, right? Did you connect everything the way that it was supposed to be connected so that it's going to fire up and work that first time? So, let's go ahead and turn it on now. Be aware, this can mess you up the first time that you ever build a computer. Typically, there is a power supply on-off switch, and then the computer case has its own power switch. So, a lot of times what happens is people try and push the computer case power switch because the power supply is in the back. They don't see it. It's out of sight, out of mind, and they think that they've done something wrong. They start tearing the computer apart, looking for what they've done wrong, and lo and behold, it's just that second power switch that's got them. So we're going to reach around here, turn that first power switch on, and then our power switch is up on top of that case. So here it is. We are going to wait and see if this system posts, which is that process of recognizing all the hardware in the system and getting it ready for the system to boot up. And this is actually a good sign. So we have a good thing going here, except it does not see our CPU fan. So it might have been which CPU fan connector that we chose, because there are two, and it may be looking for one in the first CPU fan. So let's see if we can correct that in what's called the BIOS, or basically the basic input and output system for the computer. It's kind of the first level of boot, if you will. It tells the system how to recognize all the hardware. So let's go ahead then and get into BIOS, and you do that. If you see on screen that message, you can hit F1 for setup. And so we're going in right now. I've got a keyboard and a mouse in front of us. And so we're going to go in and see if we've got that CPU fan that we can get it to recognize. Looks like I accidentally plugged it into the AOI or the water pump header, which we can probably go fix. We can probably go into the advanced BIOS settings and make that change. So we're going to go into advanced mode, and we're going to tell it to what to monitor. We're going to change the CPU to ignore, and actually, you know what? We're going to probably change that to monitor. We'll just go into the case real quick and change that, because this is going to be one of those things that every time the system has an updated BIOS or something, it's going to get mad about. So we're going to take a minute, go fix that, plug it into the other connector that was nearby, which will be the CPU, and start this process over again. So hold on just a sec. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. We got that CPU fan plug into the other connector that was nearby. So clearly there's two different power connectors there for fans. One is for an all-in-one water cooling system. The other is for the true CPU fan like we're using. So we just swapped that around. Pretty easy and common mistake. And quite honestly, it's not uncommon to have something like that when you first set everything up, that it is going to have something that needs to be modified. Eddie, why don't you go ahead and press the power button for us? Okay, so as you can see, the system is continuing the setup process, but really the whole Windows install process on this system is going to take about 10 minutes or less. We're just over 5-6 minutes in that ballpark right now, and it's got some things it's going to do in the background. And eventually I'm going to have to move this system over to a different spot and connect it up to the internet in order to download a whole bunch of updates, and that'll probably take far longer than anything that we've done to this point. So just wanted to wrap up the lab, if you will, portion of this episode, and really get Lily and Addie off to bed, since we're staying up late to do this video. But just wanted to stop for a minute and ask Lily and Addie, did you guys have fun?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Did you learn something?
Yes.
Do you want to build a computer again?
Yes.
Excellent. So for me as a dad, this is the kind of thing that is a lot of fun. Being able to share a passion I have, which is computers, with my daughters, teach them about that, and give them the confidence that down the road, if they want to build a computer, they can do so. And they've now seen it. It's new, but it's not scary. It's just you need a little bit of confidence to go in and know that you can go in and do it. And obviously we did this in a couple hours, and that's with all the fumbling and bumbling that we did in kind of collecting all of our stuff and really trying to photograph or videotape this while we were actually doing the process. So really we probably could have done this whole build in about an hour or two, and it probably took us 2 or 3 in the grand scheme of things. So really it's a great little project, something that they could have as a skill going forward. So hope you enjoyed this build. If it's something that you're looking at doing, we could share with you some of our build materials, and feel free to go out, do a little research, and maybe change the components out for things that you'd want to use. And if you want it for some gaming, whether it be light gaming or heavy gaming, definitely probably want to change a few things around. Although an i5 6 core is probably plenty of horsepower, probably want a really good graphics adapter, and the power supply we picked is actually probably potent enough to work with a significantly better graphics card. And that's probably the big thing that would need to be changed in this build is just the graphics card if you wanted to game on it. So hope you enjoyed. And again, for Bruce, Lily, and Addie, we're going to sign off, and we'll get back to Bruce and Keith in their studios to wrap things up. Thank you.
Well, it looks like the girls did enjoy that PC build. Looks like they learned a bit too.
For sure. It was a great experience for them, and something definitely outside of the norm. Right now, a distraction like that is really very welcome.
And just like that, we have reached the end of yet another episode. We certainly hope that we have given you at least some ideas of how to get through this current situation with a little bit more of your sanity intact.
And if you end up trying any of our ideas, or you have ideas of your own, please let us know. Post down below, let us know what you did. We'd love to hear about it.
And finally, if you could, hit that like button. There's a subscribe button, click on that too. There's a bell, click on that so you get notifications. Come on, it's not that big of a deal. It actually does help us out, all right? So for Keith and Bruce, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.